I didn't have to know anything about League of Legends to understand what was happening in this show. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, I
So,
kind of feel like if you have a little bit of a familiarity and sort of a basis in, I don't know, kind of steampunky worlds, you know, like I think you can kind of get it, like this intersection of science and magic kind of stuff that, you know, we kind of get in this universe. And I'm pretty familiar with that. I know you're pretty familiar with that. I mean,
yeah.
there's a lot of tropes in here that are not too outside of what I'm pretty used to. I didn't know who any of the characters were going in. I didn't really know what any of their motivations were. And I do think that probably affected my appreciation of the show, because I didn't particularly like any of the characters. And I think that if I had been playing them in a video game for a while, I might have had a different level of attachment to them coming in. But I did not.
Yeah, probably. I can get on board with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's do the plot real quick. So we won't get into spoilers just yet. We'll get into spoilers a little bit later. Just the plot basically is a thieving crew robs a penthouse apartment where, you know, basically they're just trying to steal stuff for money. They don't have any particular knowledge of what's in there, but the youngest member of the crew, oh my gosh, what's her name? Powder. I was going to call her Jinx. She's not Jinx yet. The youngest member of the crew ends up kind of sneaking her way into a back room and finding this weird blue orb, little balls. And she takes a sack of these things, and on her way out, she drops one of them or a couple of them. And, you know, unbeknownst to anybody, you know, up until this point, these things just explode and destroy this whole building. And so, you know, that kind of kicks off this mystery of like, what are these things and whatever. In the second episode, we jump into sort of the other side of this same event, which is the guy who owns the apartment or staying in the apartment is actually just on the other side of the door coming back in. And what we realize is that he is he's a scientist in his world who is experimenting with arcane magic and trying to create technology that incorporates a magical power source, which is run by these kind of orbs. And he's doing it off the books because their world controls access to technology, access to resources, access to all that stuff. And they basically have a science council that dictates what is or is not allowed to be studied. And so this is one of these things that is not allowed. So he's doing it at home instead of at the university where he works and where he's a student. And so anyway, a lot of the rest of this sort of revolves around what is going on politically in this world, what is going on with the arcane magic stuff that's happening in this world. The technology that they're developing is a whole point of you know, plot and everything else. And then also all of these characters, because you know, this explosion is surprising, but it also introduces an element where people actually want you know, they want this stuff so that they can use it for their own benefit. There's some other magic that gets involved. I don't know if we call the potion stuff. Is that magic? I'm not really sure.
I mean, I think it kind of is.
Yes.
Shimmer is the name of the drug. It's just referred to as like a street drug.
Yeah, it's basically, yeah.
But it does cause like really significant, I don't know, deformations, like physical deformations,
right?
Yeah,
like
mutations, physical mutations.
I guess, but it's like it's also like it's being extracted from this like mutated worm dragon thing. By the way, did you see? So there's this dragon thing that's sort of, I guess, the basis of Shimmer. I guess this is a little bit of a spoiler, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. But like it's Toothless, but like an ugly version of Toothless from How to Train Your Dragon. So that kind of amused me. It's like these huge giant eyes and kind of rounded face and little flappy ears, and the whole thing pretty much they could have just taken the model and then made it blotchy and pink, basically. And
I mean, kind of.
There you go. But anyway, it's an interesting show. I think what a lot of people have responded to really positively about it is its art style, which is a kind of an interesting blend of 2D and 3D animation. And It's neat. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of a lot of it, but I will say that like the technique of the animation was really good. And I think a lot of the animation, I would say this, I would certainly enjoy seeing more shows done in this style, or at least using some of the same techniques.
Yeah.
There
Yeah,
are
for sure.
there are elements of character design and stuff like that I don't really care that much about, and some of the animation gets a little weird, but in the way that for me it just gets a little bit video gamey, and that's what I kind of don't love about it. Like a lot of it has a little bit of a video game cutscene feel to it.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think some of the storytelling is done in a way that reminds me of a little bit video gamey. One of the things I was mentioning to Jen before we started was there's a lot of montages in the show, and they do a lot of like, you know, what I'll basically call music videos. They take like a very current pop song and they will put that as the basis for, you know, for a 3-minute montage. And it feels like cutscenes to me. It feels like we're like, okay, we're going to jump ahead in the story here, but you're just going to get a quick montage. And they don't always connect directly to the events that you just experienced. So it could be like, it'll be a montage, but it'll suddenly like pull in from other parts of the world and stuff. And so I don't know. I mean, some of it for me, I found a little bit hard to get into, but Jen, how did you feel about, I mean, were you like engaged the whole time? Like, did you like a lot of the characters, the story?
I mean, yeah, I was pretty engaged the whole time. The aesthetic of it was really cool and slick. And like, I really appreciated a lot of the interesting like Art Deco architecture pieces and stuff like that. That was really cool to me. I'm a big fan of that, as listeners will remember when we talked about Legend of Korra years ago. But yeah, it looked really cool. I watched pretty much all of it over the course of a weekend, so
Ooh.
I was able to dedicate a fair amount of attention to it, more than I would have if I was trying to knock this out over a few weeknights. But so I didn't get particularly lost in the montage scenes or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I will say I watched, I think I said this at the beginning, I watched the first 4 or 5 episodes, 4 episodes, 4.5 really. And then I stopped watching it for a couple weeks, and then we came back to it once we started talking about watching again.
Yeah, so. I see how that would be, you know, an obstacle to remembering all of the things that are happening.
I think some of it, well, go on.
And the world does feel pretty rich, pretty fleshed out. There's clearly some lore there that I'm not particularly privy to, but that's okay because it wasn't relevant to the actual story that they were telling in the show.
Yeah, it exists in a single, like the setting is a single city, and like Piltover, I think is the name of the city, and yet you get a lot of indications that this city is far from the only one in the world, and in fact, there's probably a lot of dangers in the wider world. Piltover seems like kind of a beacon of science and progress and all this stuff that maybe doesn't exist in a lot of the other parts of the world. And then you end up getting another character who's the mother of a character that we introduced to earlier in the series, who clearly comes from another location. She comes from another country. And, you know, so you get a sense of like, there's a bigger world happening here.